Justice prevailed. That's what Connie DeBate's family and friends are saying right now after a jury found Richard DeBate did kill his wife.
And this trial was really more than 6 years in the making, from attorneys' issues to a 2-year delay because of the pandemic.
Connie was born in Rockville, Connecticut on July 31st, 1976. Her parents are Cindy and Kenneth Mayers. Connie had a family of 4 people: Lynn, Leslie, Keith, and a brother. Connie went to the University of Connecticut after finishing from Ellington High School in 1995. Everyone who knew Connie thought she was a sweetheart who would do anything for the people she cared about. She graduated with her bachelor's degree in 1999 and went to work for Reckitt Benckiser as a pharmaceutical sales agent. Connie was friendly and liked everyone she met, and she had many friends. In the early 2000s, Connie told her close friends about a man she had met. He went by the name Richard DeBate. He was very nice to Connie and treated her like a queen. From the moment they met, Richard's family thought Connie was the one for him. Richard, who is also known as Rick, was born on July 29, 1976. He was born and raised in Manchester, Connecticut, and graduated from high school there in 1995. After high school, he went to trade school and then got a job as a computer network administrator. The wedding took place on July 4, 2003. Connie and Rick were blessed with 2 boys, RJ and Connor. Rick was a great husband and dad, always there for the family. They lived in a beautiful home on Birch View Drive in Ellington, close to Connie's best friends, Peggy and Darlene. Despite all looking fine, cracks were beginning to show in their seemingly perfect lives. On December 23, 2015, with Christmas just around the corner, the town of Ellington was festive. At 8:10 a.m., Rick dropped off the boys at the bus stop and headed to work. Connie went for an exercise class. What happened next is unclear, as Rick provided different accounts to the police. Initially, he said he dropped off the boys and went home to prepare for work. Realizing he left his laptop behind, he returned home, got an alert about a home alarm, and found a masked thief in the master bedroom. As the tense situation unfolded, Connie arrived home early due to her canceled class, unaware of the danger that awaited her. Rick shouted at his wife to alert her about the intruder in the house. The intruder then shifted his focus to Connie, and a struggle ensued between him and Rick as they raced to reach her. In the midst of the scuffle, the intruder pushed Rick down the stairs, momentarily disorienting him. Despite this setback, Rick quickly regained his composure, catching up to the intruder as they both followed Connie into the basement. Rick quickly got to his feet and ran to help Connie, but it was too late. As he ran down the stairs, he heard a gunshot, which was so loud that it temporarily made Rick hard of hearing. The intruder then turned his attention back to Rick and beat him by applying pressure to a certain area until Rick passed out. When Rick woke up, he was partially tied to a metal folding chair with zip ties. The intruder had cut him on the body with a box cutter that he had taken from Rick's toolbox. The invader then took a blowtorch and started setting things on fire. The invader then tried to use the blowtorch on Rick, but Rick was able to grab it with his free hand. Rick had said the man was wearing a mask, but he still pointed it at him. The whole thing took 5 minutes after the blowtorch incident, which meant that it was supposed to happen no later than 9:05 a.m. Rick did call the police at 10:21 a.m. and state troopers were already on their way when the security company called them automatically at 10:16 a.m. to say that a customer's alarm had gone off. This notice was sent to the authorities right away, so why didn't it go out after the blowtorch incident? The first person to arrive at 7 Birch View Drive was from the Ellington Fire Department. He saw that the front door was open, but the storm door was still closed. When he knocked and didn't hear anyone, he went inside. A thin layer of smoke caught his eye, and he saw that blood was flowing from the basement to the kitchen through the open basement door. Rick was still attached to the folding chair that was lying face down. Rick told the man who broke in that he was still inside the house. As soon as the man called for help and reported the crime as a home invasion, a huge number of police officers arrived and started looking for the shooter right away. The investigators started taking notes on every part of the house and took many pictures of Rick on the ground, showing how he was tied to the metal chair. Rick's left hand and Connie was found in the boiler room in the basement. She had been shot twice in the back of the head and once in the stomach. She was pronounced dead at the scene. This was no longer just a breaking in. Soon, K-9 units arrived in the hopes of helping detectives find the shooter. However, Rick seemed to be the only person the dogs were interested in. One of the dogs found Rick's wallet outside in the yard, which is likely where the burglar left it when he ran away. The dogs still couldn't find a scent that led them away from the scene, so they went with their captors to the ambulance where Rick was getting care for his minor injury. Rick was taken to Hartford Hospital, where investigators started to question his story right away. He was first asked about what happened that day at this location. He described the intruder and told them that he saw the man shoot Connie in the basement. After he finished telling his story, the detectives had more questions for him. And this is when they realized that Rick's story was fundamentally different. When Rick saw the alarm signal, he wasn't sure if he had set off the alarm. At first, Rick said he left before Connie dropped off the boys, but then he changed his story and said he couldn't remember who had left first. The next thing he changed was his explanation for the noises coming from upstairs. When Rick walked in, there was silence, so he went upstairs and saw that the bedroom light was on. The burglar was later caught by. The gun story was very important to the police because Connie was shot with a .357 Magnum rifle, and Rick had a gun in the house. At first, Rick told the police that he didn't know how the burglar got the gun from Connie, and he said that he saw Connie and the man fighting over the gun before the man shot Connie. Also, it looks like the basement was dark the whole time. Rick talked about how he dragged himself up the stairs while still attached to the metal chair. He called for help and tried to get Connie to return his call, but she didn't answer. He then found his cell phone. Rick carefully placed his wound so that his right hand could reach every cut on his leg, but only his left side showed the scars on his chest. Investigators were also confused by the lack of blood leading up the stairs. If Rick had dragged himself from the cellar to the kitchen, there should have been a trail of evidence. Instead, only drops of blood were found, and the only drag traces were found in the kitchen. Rick seemed to be on his way upstairs before passing out in the kitchen. They'd also wanted to know why Rick hadn't tried to check on Connie. Investigators were trying to figure out how the burglar got in because there were no signs of damage to the rest of the house. They thought the burglar got in through an open basement window, but this didn't make sense because the locks on the basement windows had been taken off from the inside and left on the windowsill. This meant that someone could not get to these locks from the outside without doing serious damage. So why did Rick or Connie take them off? Detectives often talk to people close to a victim to find out about their general lives and any problems they may have been having. After going over what had happened that morning, Rick was asked about his relationship with Connie. At first, he said that things had been pretty good, but later he said that Connie had been having some problems lately. She was depressed and had shown signs of being easily angered. The detectives then asked Rick directly if their investigation would reveal any problems in his relationship. Rick gave them both yes and no answers. Rick admitted to having an affair, but he had a good reason for it. He said that he and Connie both wanted to have another child, but were having health problems that made that impossible. After several failed attempts, they decided to try something else because Connie couldn't get pregnant. Rick brought up Sarah. Because artificial insemination was so expensive, Rick said that he, Connie, and Sarah got together and came up with a plan to have him get Sarah pregnant. They decided that Rick would seduce Sarah and use it to get her pregnant. He asked Connie to agree with the plan and even said that it was mostly her idea. How would they raise the child? It looks like they would co-parent the child together. When asked more about what happened, Rick's story started to change again. He told the police that their child was due in February 2016, but when they asked him if Connie knew about the pregnancy, he avoided answering. If this had all been Connie's idea, she would have known as soon as Rick did. Rick then said that Connie and Sarah had never actually talked, which again showed big holes in his story. The truth came out by the end of the conversation. Rick had been cheating on Connie for years before she died, and Sarah was pregnant without her knowing. The investigators didn't try to hide their doubt. They told Rick that what happened at their house didn't match up with what he said happened that morning, and that his whole story didn't make sense. He strongly denied any wrongdoing in connection with what happened to Connie. When the police found out about Rick's affair, they focused on finding Sarah later that same day. When she was able to give them a statement, Sarah admitted that she knew Rick and Connie were married, but said Rick had told her he was getting a divorce. Sarah found out she was pregnant on June 18, 2015, but she didn't tell Rick. When Rick found out, he told Sarah that he had just hired a divorce lawyer. This was a lie, just like many others. Before Connie died, Sarah and Rick were still together. They even took a trip to Vermont in the middle of December 2015. They talked about how they would tell Connie about the trip, but Rick planned to wait until after the holidays. Following conversations with Connie's closest friends, investigators learned that Connie would never have let Rick have a child with someone else. Connie told her closest friends everything, but they say she never brought up Sarah or the kid's situation. If she had known Rick was cheating, she would have told them for sure. Rick's friends knew about Sarah and the pregnancy, but not about Connie's affair. The investigating team wasn't sure what was going on, but they thought Rick had been involved in the murder of his wife from the start. They didn't tell anyone, including the police, about this, because they thought someone had broken in, killed Connie, and hurt Rick. No one close to Rick had even thought that he might have been involved in Connie's death, and they mourned with him even though they were scared. They didn't want to stop looking into other possibilities. There was someone who might have wanted to hurt the Debates, the contractor who worked on the house. They had a long legal dispute. After having many problems with the contractor's work and Connie even raising concerns about her safety, Rick and Connie filed a small claims lawsuit against the person. In 2015, the troublesome man had already vandalized Connie's car twice. This theory was dropped when it was found that the contractor had a good excuse for not being there on the day of the crime. He also had nothing to do with the intruder Rick had described. No one but the police thought Rick was responsible for Connie's death, but many other people noticed something was wrong with him. He didn't seem to be grieving like you might expect. As investigators dig deeper into the Debates' lives, they have found some clear financial problems. Connie thought she had to take care of everything. She told her close friends that she was thinking about divorcing Rick, and she even kept a file on her notes app called Why I Want to Divorce that listed all the reasons, including Rick's lying, his mistreatment of her, his failure to be a good father to his sons, and his one-sidedness. The police learned about Rick and Connie's 2 life insurance policies in the middle of January 2016. Each policy was worth a substantial $475,000. It turned out that Rick's life insurance had expired due to non-payment, leaving only Connie's coverage in effect. Rick wasted no time collecting Connie's insurance proceeds, waiting only 5 days after her death. Additionally, a month later he received $75,000 from her employer. With the help of a number of search warrants, detectives built their case against Rick over the next year. They looked at Connie's Fitbit more than Rick's phone records, bank records, letters to other people, security system information, and communications. On December 23rd, Connie's Fitbit showed that she had been active for the first time at 7:52 a.m., followed by a long period of inactivity that fit with her story. The search warrant mentioned that Connie drove home. There was another recorded period of 10 minutes of inactivity from 9:37 to 9:43 a.m. It indicated that she returned to the house at 9:20 a.m. and remained stationary. Investigators theorized that Connie might have been dozing off during this time. Subsequently, Connie resumed normal movement for the next 20 minutes. It was 10:05 a.m. when Connie's Fitbit last saw her moving. Why was this so important? Because it showed that Connie had not been killed when Rick said she had been. At that time, Connie was still breathing and moving, an hour after Rick said he saw the invader kill her. The police arrested Rick on April 14, 2017, because they had enough evidence to convict him. He was charged with killing Connie, tampering with evidence, and lying to detectives. Rick pleaded not guilty to the charges. A 50-page police affidavit described Rick's relationship with Sarah, his inconsistencies, and the Fitbit data. The small town of Ellington was shocked to hear that Rick was in jail because no one had thought of him as the leader. Even Connie's close friends, with whom she had talked about her marriage problems, thought that many people had problems without it getting this bad. He immediately posted his $1 million bail bond once it was set. Even though there was a lot of evidence, the case wasn't tried in court until April 5, 2022. There had been 2 delays. From the time Connie was arrested until this trial, his case got a lot of attention from the media. It became famous as a case that a Fitbit solved, which Connie's family didn't like because they thought Connie was downplayed for the sake of a catchy headline. Even though it looked like the prosecution had a strong case, the defense was able to present some evidence that pointed the finger at the burglar. Unidentified DNA was found in 6 different places in the house, which fits with Rick's story about how the burglar got in through the closet, went downstairs, and ended up in the basement. The third piece of defense evidence was the small amount of gunshot residue found on Rick. Right away, it was clear why Rick was being charged. Sarah's pregnancy and Connie's thoughts of leaving him were tearing Rick's life apart. Attorney Matthew C. Jancy informed the jury on May 10, 2022, that time was progressing, pressure was increasing, the baby was on the way, and the defendant's worst fears were likely to be realized. The jury deliberated for 3 hours on all charges before making a decision. Richard DeBate was found guilty. After 6.5 hard years, justice was finally done for Connie and her family. Judge Karen Clack gave her a sentence of 65 years in prison, calling the crime horrible, cold-blooded, and unfathomable. Her sentence was only 1 year short of the maximum punishment. His lawyer did say they would be filing an appeal, but it was denied.
Could say that it sort of draws a line under this dreadful, dreadful story of Millie's abduction, rape and subsequent murder. Although, of course, we need to remember that Levi Belfield has only now admitted his guilt.
Amanda Jane Dowler, also known as Millie, was born to Bob and Sally Dowler on June 25, 1988. She was friendly, lively, and had a twinkle in her eye. She was a kindness-filled girl who loved making other people smile when they were having a bad day, and she had a lot of close friends. Millie's sudden death was harder for everyone because she was such a bright spot in their lives. At 3:07 p.m. on March 21, 2002, Millie departed Hetside School and walked to Walton on Thames Station with a friend from the Weebridge. The two girls boarded a train, one stop before Millie's usual exit. They intended to visit the station cafe for a quick meal. At 3:47 p.m., Millie informed her dad of her expected arrival home in 30 minutes. At 4:55 p.m., the girls parted ways, and Millie proceeded home. She was last observed waiting for a bus on Station Avenue, where Gamma's friend identified her. Despite efforts, Millie was not captured on any other CCTV cameras along the road. When she failed to arrive home as scheduled, her parents contacted the police at 7:00 p.m. to report her missing. A massive search operation was launched, with many police officers looking for Millie on foot. Police helicopters were also sent out to try to find the girl or find some sign that she had been in the area. Rivers nearby were looked for, and Millie's expected route was carefully studied. At 4:32 p.m., a red Dew Nexia was seen on CCTV cameras along Station Avenue. 7 years later, we would find out who because Millie's disappearance came as a surprise. Police asked the public many times to help them find anyone who might have seen anything strange when she was last seen. At first, they thought she might have run away on purpose or been taken by someone she knew. She was in a fairly open area, and it didn't make sense that a stranger would have taken her at this time of day. Crime Watch UK featured a reenactment of Millie's final known actions, accompanied by a direct plea to the young child. The best-case scenario, despite her family's belief that she wouldn't run away, was Millie running away. This puzzled her mother, who couldn't comprehend why her youngest daughter would behave in such a manner. The police continued to believe that Millie had been abducted by an unknown person. No witnesses had come forward, despite Millie being seen multiple times that afternoon, and there were no reports of any kind of struggle. They thought she knew the person she left with because they didn't think she would have gone anywhere with a stranger. After 4 weeks, there were still no leads and Millie was still missing. Following the discovery of a body in the River Thames on February 23, 2002, it was initially thought that the deceased individual was Millie Dowler. On the other hand, it was discovered to be the cremated remains of Macy Thomas, who had been missing since the previous year. Thomas was 73 years old. The cause of death of Macy was not considered suspicious. It was most likely due to drowning. Without any new information regarding Millie's whereabouts, months went by. It was difficult for the Dowlers to grasp their daughter's departure without a trace, which led to an increase in their level of frustration. In addition to the grief that they were experiencing, the family was subjected to examination, with Bob Dowler receiving special attention due to the speculation that Millie knew the person who went missing with her. This was emphasized by the police on multiple occasions. While the family was dealing with their grief, they also had to deal with the false rumors that were going around in the media. The fact that Bob Dowler was wrongly put in the spotlight made it difficult for him to deal with the undeserved attention. He was aware that the time that was spent on him could have been utilized to discover the person who was truly responsible for the crime. In a later statement, the authorities admitted that the inquiry into Bob's possible involvement may have missed important clues. The Dowlers were given the advice to prepare themselves for the worst in the month of June. Despite the fact that their son was sending Millie text messages in the hope that she would be safe and sound, he announced a reward of $100,000 for information. In September of 2002, Millie's body was found in Yate Heath Woods in Yate, Hampshire. She was found naked and without any of her belongings. Through the use of dental data as a means of verification, the authorities were able to rapidly identify Millie. It is important to note that her phone, purse, and backpack were never found again. Following Millie's disappearance, the investigation changed to focus on finding the individual responsible for her death. A huge roadblock was set up near Yaddle Heath Woods by the University of Washington Police Department, which marked the beginning of Operation Ruby. There were no new leads discovered despite the fact that about 6,000 drivers were arrested. A year after Millie was last seen, forensic testing on objects from her bedroom and the detection of unidentifiable male DNA on clothing failed to produce substantial clues. Both of these discoveries were made. Despite conducting lengthy interviews, doing house-to-house inspections, and conducting close examinations of people who were in close proximity to the last known whereabouts of Millie, the police were unable to find any leads. A peculiar letter from an unknown sender that claimed responsibility for Millie's destiny briefly gave rise to hope. But it was eventually discovered that the letter had been written by Paul Hugh. Millie's situation was exploited by those who struggled with mental health concerns, which included Lean Newman, who made bogus phone calls pretending to be Millie. In a series of emails, Gary Farr asserted that Millie had been brought into Poland illegally. Amidst all of this mayhem, Millie's family searched for answers with all their might. In 2003, Marcia McDonald was fatally struck near her home in Hampton. In 2004, Kate Shitty survived an assault, while Emily Delagrange tragically lost her life. Levi Belfield, with a history of criminal activity, was later linked to these crimes, leading to his arrest in 2004. It was determined that Levi Belfield, who was born in 1968, was responsible for a number of crimes, including the killings of Marcia McDonald and Emily Delagrange, as well as the attempted murder of Kate Shitty, among others. His behavior and deeds against women were motivated by his conviction that he was a gift from God. He was a predator. Through his wheel clamping company, Belfield was able to acquire information of the surroundings, which assisted his criminal activities. His prey consisted of young women, and he moved around the streets. It was in 2009 when Belfield was recognized in security film that was taken close to the spot where Millie was last seen. This was the beginning of his involvement in Millie's case. Belfield's link with Millie became apparent on March 2, 2010, when he admitted to kidnapping, raping, and killing her. This was in spite of the fact that he maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. According to Belfield's account, he had first intended to release Millie, but he ended up losing control of the situation. He lied to the authorities by telling them the story that was not true, but he later admitted his guilt. It was decided that Levi Belfield should be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of Marcia McDonald and Emily Delagrange. Additionally, he was given a concurrent sentence of 20 years for the attempted murder of Kate Shitty. Millie's case was brought to a certain degree of resolution as a result of Belfield's disclosure, which brought to light the complexities and difficulties involved in solving such horrible crimes. The State University Police Department expressed remorse for the delay in apprehending Belfield, recognizing that doing so could have prevented other tragedies from occurring.
Jennifer Odom, a 12-year-old Pasco County schoolgirl, was murdered.
She was a young girl who was abducted from a bus stop.
12 years old Jennifer Renee Odom attended Thomas E. Wakeman Middle School in Wesley Chapel, Florida, where she was enrolled in that school's 7th grade. Her accomplishments included being a skilled barefoot water skier and leading the school band on the clarinet in the year 1993. Jennifer Converse was Renee Converse's firstborn child, and her stepfather, Clark Converse, was her stepfather. Jennifer was born on August 25, 1980. She was the granddaughter of Jim and Margie Denny and lived with her sister, Jessica Ann Odom, who was 9 years old at the time. Street Joseph, a little hamlet in Florida located close to Dade City, was where they made their home. In addition, the sisters had a bunny that they called Beanie, and Jennifer had a Springer Spaniel that she very much adored and called Gypsy. Activities such as riding four-wheelers, swimming in the stream that was located behind their house, and constructing forts on their 15-acre family property were some of the things that they enjoyed doing together. On Friday, February 19, 1993, Jennifer got ready for school by wearing a red cashmere jumper that was a present from her grandma, along with white pants and a white turtleneck. On that particular morning, she put on her black boots and waited at the mailbox for the school bus. During contests, she was typically the skier who reached the highest point of the human pyramid. At approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Renee, her mother, made a left turn to go to work. Jennifer boarded the bus and sat in the rear where she could see her mother, who was standing there. However, when Jessica arrived at her residence at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the door was locked and Jennifer was nowhere to be found. As a result of Jessica's concern, she called their mother to inform her of Jennifer's absence, despite the fact that Michelle, Jennifer's closest friend, had confirmed that she had witnessed Jennifer exit the bus and head home. There was a rapid and extensive search operation that was carried out by around 400 volunteers who covered the rural area that was approximately 60 square kilometers in size. The blue vehicle that was reported by several of Jennifer's acquaintances who had seen it in the neighborhood was the primary focus of the search that was conducted by law enforcement, which was made possible by the participation of neighbors, family members, and volunteers. It was believed that the driver was a Caucasian man with brown hair who was 40 years old. The truck had certain characteristics, like pipes or a ladder in the back, a rear bumper that was painted silver, and a trailer hitch that had cables hanging from it. On Thursday, February 25, 1993, approximately 10 miles north of Jennifer's school bus stop, a man and a woman discovered Jennifer's naked body in an abandoned orange grove. This discovery occurred 6 days after Jennifer went missing. Due to the fact that she had sustained significant head injuries from blunt force, the investigators came to the conclusion that she most likely passed away in the woods not too long after being kidnapped. The blue truck driven by the perpetrator and the driver in the vehicle were never located. In a statement conveying his sorrow, Sheriff Alan Lyon expressed that everyone might see Jennifer as their niece, sister, or grandchild and recognized that it was a tragedy beyond sorrow. There were no substantial leads or breakthroughs in the investigation into the case, despite the tremendous efforts that were made. Another adolescent girl had been kidnapped and severely assaulted in Pasco County 13 months prior to Jennifer's kidnapping. Jennifer was the victim of this same crime. In spite of the fact that she survived, the young lady sustained significant head and skull injuries, which ultimately resulted in paralysis on her left side. The DNA was taken from the crime scene, and the investigators felt that there might be a connection between the two incidents due to the similarities between them. In order to assist with the investigation, the police sought the assistance of Nancy Meyer, who is a psychic. In spite of the fact that her observations were occasionally useful, the detectives encountered difficulties in solving the case. The case of Jennifer received widespread attention after it was highlighted on the television show Unsolved Mysteries in the year 1994. This led to an increase in both awareness and tips. In 2015, detectives decided to review the case because of technical improvements. In the course of the investigation into the case that took place in 1992, a DNA profile was produced from the biological evidence that was gathered, and family searching was utilized in order to identify suspects. In light of the fact that Jeffrey Crum, who is already incarcerated, was identified as a possible match, the detectives decided to acquire DNA samples from Crumb's family. The findings indicate a direct DNA match between Jennifer and Crumb's father. Detectives subsequently established a connection between Crumb and the 1992 case, in which he had kidnapped another female and brutally harmed her. The investigation into Jennifer's case was renewed in 2019 when Crumb was arrested and sentenced for the case that occurred in 1992. Due to the fact that the detectives suspected Crumb of being involved, they carried out an exhaustive investigation and questioned individuals who were affiliated with Crumb. On July 27, 2023, the authorities made the announcement that they had made the final arrest in the case of Jennifer. Jeffrey Norman Crumb is currently being charged with kidnapping, assault, and murder in connection with Jennifer's case. Bill Glass, the attorney for the state, has stated that he is confident in his ability to pursue the death penalty, highlighting the gravity of the situation. In 2015, Crumb was discovered in an unexpected manner, according to Sheriff Al Nean, who emphasized that Crumb was not a previous suspect. The Hernando County Sheriff's Office should be contacted by anyone who may have had contact with Crumb or who may have information about additional possible crimes that he committed, as he urged those individuals to do so. Crumb was renowned for a number of violent felonies, including an armed robbery that occurred in the 1980s, kidnapping, assault, and domestic abuse. He had a history of committing violent felonies. At this time, he is being held without bond at the Hernando County Jail, where he is currently serving 2 life terms. Jennifer's family had a range of feelings as a result of the arrest, which brought about closure after 30 years, but also helped to reawaken old scars. Sheriff Nyan expressed gratitude for the hard work and dedication of law enforcement officers, detectives, civilians, and those who provided information that was used in the investigation. After suffering alongside Jennifer's family, the community expressed relief after the arrest, hoping that it would prevent additional harm to other families. Jennifer's family had been included in the community. The narrative of Jennifer, as it developed over the course of several years, provided as a sharp reminder of the agony that is caused by such horrible murders and the resiliency of families who are pursuing justice for their loved ones.